Okay, good evening. Targeted Wealth Creation coming to you tonight on Tuesday with a discussion on a brand new YieldMax Bitcoin underlying income strategy fund. So a single stock fund, if you will. And it's kind of, I'll describe it because I'm pretty familiar with the underlying. They have an underlying called BITO, B-I-T-O. And basically, for those of you that know it, great. For those of you that don't, it's a ProShares Bitcoin-oriented fund. It actually pays a dividend, but before you ask, no, none of those dividends are covered in this fund because they don't buy the underlying, right? So YieldMax's strategy on all their funds is to buy synthetic calls, so they simulate long BITO, and BITO moves as does Bitcoin. And the way BITO mimics Bitcoin is through the use of CME options, right? So all of you know a few years ago they came out with options on Bitcoin. So it's a whole options market, it's a futures market, if you will, right? The CME is futures. So it's the same place you go out and you go long on gold, silver, platinum, wheat, coffee, orange juice, cattle, lumber, etc. in the futures market. So CME is a big player in the futures market. So that's how BITO mimics Bitcoin. And since BITO has a big following as one of the ETFs, then YieldMax sees that the volume count is there. So in a few instances this year, I've already put my own, before this fund was available with income paying, I've used BITO. I own some BITO shares now. I think it paid $1.14 on this last payout. And it makes its money also on the volatility. They buy calls, sell puts, etc. So, okay, so brand new fund, just initiated today. So let's dive in and take a look. I'm using the same kind of a tracker here. I need to stretch a few columns out, so I just organized this. So on the opening day, remember all YieldMax funds open at $20. So this thing actually traded up to like $21.99 intraday, closed at 20.45, right? So it tracks to BITO. They're selling calls, creating synthetic call and puts, and then matching that with separate calls. So I'll dive in and show you those just like I would on Coney or Misty or any other fund, right? So they started with some cash, and they did one transaction. Well, actually, let's jump to the synthetic. So I've got the synthetic as a 29, right? You're not used to seeing a low number like that. Well, you might be in some of the stocks. So they wrote a synthetic today on 860 of those, all of them at one strike price, right? So it's a $29 strike price on 5/17. You'll notice that date is a bulk of the YieldMax excuse me, funds. So anyway, they sold, or they bought the call for $1.65 and they sold a put for $3.01. So I assume they did this lower than 29, so they were able to get more for the put than they were the call. So that yielded $116,960. Call it profit, still has to be settled, but that's because they sold the put for more than the call. So after closing and putting today's values in, they have a 70,000 gain, right? Since there's only one entry, so the gain's kind of gone down, but on the books, we're still showing it as this because this amount hasn't been settled. All right, so let me go back to my April tab where we then sold if you will, like a weekly call, right? So we went out on a 426 and we sold 860. You'll notice that matches the same volume number of contracts as the synthetic, and they got 45 cents, right? That's only worth 28 cents after the close today, so they're making money on that. But the way these pay, like all YieldMax, at the time of the writing, you're credited with the 39,000, right? So the only thing that happened here today, they started with a cash balance, but I didn't update these, but I will. So they distributed it across the various treasuries and the First American Government Fund. So the share count remained the same, and we'll go into that. It's 125,000. You'll see that in the holdings. So let's take a look. This won't be a long video because it's just on this one fund. My plan is to roll this into the other two, but I wanted to go into detail about what the underlying was for those of you that might be confused. You know, does it actually own Bitcoins? No, it does not, right? It's a ETF on top of another, if you will, single stock ETF that does mimic the underlying Bitcoin itself through the futures market. Okay. Said that a few times, so hopefully that comes through to you guys. So in the holdings, I did update this portion. I just didn't transfer it over yet to my April tab. So they started with just cash, and they started with 2,500,000, right? So they moved up to 2,557, right? Still have the same amount of shares. So the price closed at 2045, and if you divide all the shares by the closing assets, you get 2046. So think of it on sale for a penny, right? I'm going to create this chart down here once I have a few days, right? But right now, there's 70,000 to the positive. We always want a negative number because of debits and credits that's actually positive. I know that always seems strange, but accounting is strange to a lot of people. Here's the 1 weekly call, right? It matches the synthetic. And if you notice here, this shows you that we're behind the curve, right? But that actually puts money in our pocket, right? So we're 70,000 to the negative, right? On this. But we have a long time, right? We have out till 517. You see that when you look at the synthetic, right? All right, let's take a look at what that's done then to our payment, right? So I'm going to tell you guys flat out, this is going to be the same thing as a Misty. You know, Misty came out on the 23rd. This came out of February, I think. 21st, 23rd, may have come in a day earlier. This launched on the 23rd of April. There will not be, unless management decides differently, if you follow the track record of this late, there won't be a payout for May, okay? But with Misty, you know how big that payment was because it did so well, right? So it had 5.5 weeks, and it got the first 3+ payout. It was 412. Now it's hurting a little bit so far, but I'm thinking that that's recovering nicely, especially with the update in the markets for Coney and Misty again today, right? So we set at the weeklies is yielding right here, this 39,000, right, is yielding 31 cents. And we've got some synthetic income. And so altogether we've got $1.25. Now typically they use this to pay. So let's not be anticipating a May payment, but instead a June payment. But it's starting out well. I looked up the IV. The IV is around 67. So once Bitcoin gets really moving, then you're going to see a higher IV and BITO. But right now, BITO's come down. But let's take a look at this weekly. So on my active weekly calls, they're all bunched together. We're only 3.41% out of the money, right? But this thing with a 67, I actually don't think we'll break out of 30 this week. Who knows though? But what I did on the chart for you guys, like I typically do, I haven't done my positives and negatives and rank it. I'd like to see them spread this out, but maybe on the weekly. I mean, they have enough volume to support these guys, you know, because BITO is heavily option oriented also, but it's not near the volume that some of the other big Bitcoin. It's not as big as Coinbase or as big as Mr. MicroStrategy. So anyway, I tracked here. This was pretty much flat. BITO was actually down 2 cents, right, from 29.03 to 29.01. But overall, so I drew up my parallel lines for technical analysis here on the chart. So we really need, a lot of times we'll go up here and we'll bounce off this resistance level, right, which is just a hair over 30. So I was saying here, if we want to see a breakout in Bitcoin, and who knows when it'll happen, but when we do, you're going to see it break out of 30, and you should see it break out on the volume. So we're sitting down here at I think under 1 million shares traded, right? But you can see how aggressive this thing was when it was riding the bull shot up. Now we've formed this declining, what they would call a bull flag pattern, right? So until it breaks out, it's going to bump against the resistance. Now it's bumped 3 times, but I've seen these flags go for, you know, this is a 2-month flag. I've seen them go for 4 months, 5 months. It just depends, right? I suspect we're going to break out sooner rather than later, but it may not be this week. Let's see how Bitcoin trades. Okay, that's all I've had for you guys. So looking positive, this is YBIT, you know, a single stock based on BITO that should pay us some good revenue, good distributions. Okay, guys, I'll still do later tonight or early in the morning my Misty and Coney. Again, this is not financial advice. This is for fun and education. Okay, see you guys.